In the autumn of 1973, the quiet university town of Eugene, Oregon was unsettled by the disappearance of a 16-year-old girl named Jessica Morrow. She had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a torn pair of foam-padded headphones stained with something dark. But 14 years later, when a hunter stumbled upon a shallow grave tucked beneath pine needles and moss, he uncovered a truth so suffocating it would unravel the very fabric of a family and lead to the most horrifying revelation imaginable. It began on a Thursday morning. The mist that curled around the trees near Hendricks Park was thicker than usual, dulling sound and sight alike. Jessica had laced up her sneakers just after 6, slid her cassette player into her backpack, and told her mother she'd be back before breakfast. She didn't come back. The forest absorbed everything: sound, motion, presence, even panic. Hours passed before someone noticed her absence. Her mother called her school. Her coach hadn't seen her. Her best friend Ellie hadn't joined her on the morning run for the first time in months, citing a sore ankle. By dusk, volunteers flooded the trails. Flashlights swept through ferns. Dogs barked at nothing. The air smelled of damp bark and wet leaves. Somewhere in the underbrush, they found the headphone split down the cord, left ear pad torn open like a wound. Nearby, a red pine cone crushed into the soil. No footprints. No sign of struggle. Just the silence of a forest that had seen too much. Rumors bloomed quickly. Someone said they'd heard a scream around dawn, distant and brief. Another claimed they'd seen a gray pickup truck idling near the ranger gate, driver hidden in shadows. No one could describe the driver. No license plate. Only the sound of tires scraping gravel and the heavy scent of diesel. Jessica's bedroom remained untouched. Bed made, journal half written. Her dog Kip waited by the front door for days, then weeks. The town grieved, then forgot, at least outwardly. But beneath the surface, in locked drawers and closed mouths, the mystery festered like rot beneath the bark. The woods grew back, but they remembered. The man who found her wasn't looking for anything human. He was tracking Elk's silent, cautious steps along the southern ridge above Spencer Butte. The sky was the color of ash, and the cold crept in low, brushing the back of his neck like a breath. He paused near a tangle of underbrush where the earth rose in a subtle mound. The soil looked recently disturbed, though not fresh. Something unnatural about its symmetry, its stillness. He knelt, pushed aside leaves. Beneath the top layer of needles, a pale-edged plastic. A zipper corroded. He didn't open it. Instead, he backed away and called the sheriff from the first ranger station he found. The shallow grave was just 12 inches deep. The bones curled in on themselves, fetal. Shreds of polyester clung to brittle joints, remnants of a windbreaker. Blonde strands still clung to the base of the skull. There was no doubt who it was. Jessica Morrow had been dead for 14 years. Next to the body, buried just a few feet away, they found the backpack, mold-spotted, buckles rusted. Inside, a bundle of cassette tapes, water-damaged but labeled. A bag of dried apricots. 2 sticks of gum, and a plastic sleeve containing 6 photographs, undeveloped negatives but intact. At the bottom of the bag, wrapped in tissue paper that had fused to the lining, lay an object that would puzzle investigators for months. A fountain pen, black lacquer gold nib. On its side, engraved initials EV. It meant nothing to the crime scene team. They cataloged it, bagged it, and moved on. But the photos would speak louder. Developed the next day, they revealed Jessica in the days before she vanished, sitting on a bench outside the school gym, laughing with her hair in a ponytail. In another, she tied her shoes near the forest trail. In the last image, she stood in the mist with her back to the camera, her expression unreadable. There was no record of who took them. The press circled like vultures. Old wounds reopened. The scream someone remembered. The truck, the boyfriend, the coach, the ranger. But the pen, so ordinary, so forgettable, rested quietly in evidence its story still buried. Daniel Creel had always demanded discipline. His track team ran laps in the rain, wind, and heat. Miss one practice, and you were benched for the week. Jessica had been his favorite until she wasn't. At 42, Creel still jogged the trails himself every morning, clipboard tucked under his arm like a shield. He lived alone in a bungalow near campus walls, bare fridge nearly empty. No family photos, no warmth, just the smell of antiseptic and liniment, like the locker room he never really left. When the investigation reopened in 1987, Creel became the first real suspect. 2 students, now adults, came forward, recalling whispered rumors that had circled back in '73. Jessica, they claimed, had discovered his affair with a junior sprinter, a girl barely 17. Jessica had threatened to tell someone, maybe even her mother, maybe the principal. Weeks later, she vanished. Police searched Creel's home and office. They found a torn page from a journal slipped behind a filing cabinet, Jessica's handwriting. Coach is watching again, pretending to help with my form. Feels wrong. Dated 10 days before she disappeared. Creel didn't deny the affair. He simply shrugged. I made mistakes, he said, eyes unblinking. But I didn't kill that girl. He claimed Jessica was unstable, emotional, that she had a temper. He called her manipulative and said she twisted things. He was fired weeks after Jessica vanished, not for murder but for violating conduct rules. Yet no charges ever stuck. When confronted with the photos from the backpack, Creel hesitated, not because he recognized them, but because of what they meant. She looks happy there, he said, squinting. Calm. That's not how I remember her. The contradiction lingered in the air like stale sweat. Calm, happy. But his journal entry told a different story. The torn headphones, the scream, a secret relationship exposed. The motive was clear, the opportunity plausible. Yet something was missing. Creel had never owned a camera, never developed a photo, and no pen of his ever bore the initials EV. Still, he was the first to fall under the town's suspicion, and in the fog of guilt and memory, few protested. The scent of liniment lingered long after he left the station. Lucas Wren had been Jessica's first kiss. They dated for 7 months, which in high school might as well be a decade. He was a year older, lean, brooding, too clever for his own good. Wrote poetry in spiral notebooks, smoked clove cigarettes behind the gym, and once carved her initials into the bark of an elm tree outside the track field. The scar is still there. When Jessica ended things gently with a note and a soft-voiced explanation, something in Lucas soured. He stopped showing up to practice, started skipping class. A teacher found a drawing in his notebook, a girl running into a forest, her legs vanishing into fog. The week before she disappeared, Lucas had approached her outside school. Witnesses said they argued. One girl claimed Lucas grabbed Jessica's arm. Another said Jessica cried. No adults intervened. When questioned in 1973, Lucas claimed he was home that morning, alone, his parents out of town. No alibi. Now in 1987, Lucas was 30 and working at an auto body shop 2 towns north. Balding early, hands stained with grease. He didn't flinch when the detectives arrived. I didn't kill Jess, he said flatly. I loved her. Still do. In his trailer, they found a box sealed with duct tape. Inside, photos of Jessica. Newspaper clippings. Her final school yearbook pages dog-eared. A cassette tape labeled Morning Mix, JM. He claimed she gave it to him. Her handwriting smudged and faded. The box looked like a shrine, or a grave. But Lucas didn't own a fountain pen, and when shown the monogrammed EV pen found with the backpack, he shrugged. Ellie's maybe Jess gave her gifts all the time. The detectives pressed harder. Why the photos? Why keep them hidden? Lucas looked down, fingers twitching. She was mine before all of them, he said softly. Before the coach, before the woods. He became suspect number 2. Emotionally volatile, no alibi, fixated on a girl who had moved on. And yet, Jessica's final photos showed no fear of him. He was never behind the lens, never near her that last week. A threat, certainly, but perhaps the wrong kind. From his lookout tower near Mount Pisgah, Emery Bell watched the forest breathe. He rarely came down. Supplies were brought to him once a week, canned beans, matches, instant coffee. His radio crackled only when needed. Some said he spoke to animals more than people. Others claimed he didn't speak at all. In 1973, Bell was 35, a Vietnam veteran turned forest ranger. He patrolled the very trails Jessica ran. Few noticed him then. Fewer questioned the man alone in the woods. In 1987, when Jessica's grave was unearthed near one of his usual routes, attention turned sharply. A deputy remembered something during the original search. Bell had led a small group into a remote ravine, then called off the trail early, citing unstable ground. The ravine was less than a quarter-mile from the burial site. He said it was nothing. But a search of his tower told a different story. Beneath the floorboard, investigators found a metal trunk. Inside, buttons from girls' coats, broken hair clips, school ID cards, and 3 Polaroids of teenagers no one could identify. Jessica's belongings weren't among them, but the pattern was clear. Souvenirs. Or trophies. Bell was brought in. He didn't deny the items. Just stared past the officers, his eyes fixed on something none of them could see. "I find what's lost," he said. "Always have." They showed him Jessica's photos. She was a runner, he muttered. Always fast. Did he follow her, watch her? He smiled, slow and soft. Only once. The backpack, the negatives, the pen he claimed no knowledge. The pen especially he dismissed. Too delicate, he said. Doesn't belong out here. He became the most dangerous kind of suspect, silent, strange, with a cache of unexplained objects and proximity to the scene. But when forensics tested the items, none tied to Jessica. No fingerprints. No DNA. Nothing definitive. Still, townsfolk whispered. Called him the collector. Parents crossed the street when he passed. His tower, once a symbol of safety, became a silhouette of dread. The forest didn't speak, but it remembered. And if Bell was innocent, it was only by omission. He saw more than he ever said, and someone perhaps counted on that. The grave sat in a shallow hollow beneath a fir whose bark curled like dry parchment. No marker, no cross, just time, dirt, and decay. The medical examiner concluded Jessica's skull bore a hairline fracture, blunt force trauma. No defensive wounds, no signs of restraint. Death had come quickly, likely from behind. A predator's strike, the kind that needs silence, precision control. What startled investigators wasn't the body, it was what surrounded it. The animal trap lay half buried near her side, rusted teeth still open, untriggered. Its placement wasn't incidental, it was deliberate. Someone had set it down, then dug the grave. It hadn't caught Jessica. It was left behind, as a message, or a signature. The backpack, pulled from the second pit a few feet away, revealed its contents slowly. Waterlogged notebooks, gum wrappers, a pair of rolled socks, perfectly folded. The cassette player's battery door cracked, a melted chocolate bar untouched. And the photos. 6 in total, most taken from a distance. Jessica in her track gear. Jessica walking past the library. Jessica seated on a bench, eyes closed, sunlight filtering through her lashes. The angles felt personal, intimate. Not surveillance, not voyeuristic. Familiar. She smiled in some, looked serious in others. In none did she seem afraid. That alone was disturbing. The negatives were clean preserved despite the years. Whoever had buried the bag had taken care wrapping the photos in a sealed sleeve. The pen rested at the bottom, almost forgotten. The initials EV, barely visible beneath grime. Detectives returned to the old school. Yearbooks, class photos, handwriting samples. A librarian recalled Jessica and Ellie once sharing a pen with those same initials, a birthday gift. Black with gold trim. She called it her lucky charm, the woman said. Never lent it out. Except, perhaps once. Ellie hadn't mentioned the pen. No one had. It had slipped into the evidence file, unremarkable amid greater horrors. Until now, the pen should not have been in that grave. And if it belonged to Ellie, if Jessica gave it to her as a gift, how had it ended up with Jessica's body? No one asked the question. Not yet. But the stillness around that pen felt deliberate, too quiet, like breath held before a scream. The photos haunted Mara Vance. She'd studied them under lamplight, fingers gloved, breath shallow. Jessica wasn't merely captured, she was known. Each image framed with affection, not malice. One photograph stood out above the others, Jessica seated on a low stone wall, shoelaces untied, her head cocked mid-laugh. The angle was low, close. Taken by someone who knelt before her, who made her smile like that, who made her feel safe. There was no fear in that expression. Mara had returned to Eugene not for nostalgia, but for answers. Her Aunt Ellie Vance had left a voicemail days before her death. The voice had trembled, cracked, and then gone flat. "I need to tell you something about Jessica. I can't hold it anymore." Then silence. Ellie was found 2 days later in her chair, the television still humming. Mara, a podcaster known for revisiting cold cases, came not as family, but as a forensic archivist of pain. She rented a room off Coburg Road and began digging. The camera model used for the photos was traced to Nikon FTN, popular in the early 70s. Only a handful of students at South Eugene High had access to the school darkroom where the film might have been developed. Jessica wasn't one of them. But Ellie had been. A yearbook photo surfaced, Ellie 15 grinning beside a tray of negatives. Caption: Shutterbugs Club. Capturing the year one frame at a time. Mara stared at the image for hours. It didn't make sense. Ellie had never admitted to taking photographs of Jessica, never appeared in any. But her prints, delicate and slow-curved, matched the club's archive. A match confirmed by comparison to the signature on library cards from that same year. Had Ellie taken the photos, or had she merely held them in her attic? Mara found a shoebox labeled Summer. Inside, a mix of snapshots, beaches, dogs, family. Then buried under envelopes, a strip of negatives identical in style to the ones from the backpack. But one photo was unmistakably recent: Jessica, in the same outfit as the day she disappeared. And behind her, out of focus, a figure, cropped at the shoulders, just a hand holding a camera. Familiar. Mara's pulse quickened. The angle matched the others. But the hand, the sleeve, it was Ellie's jacket. Ellie Vance had always been the quiet one. In every photo, she stood to the side, smiling just enough, never too much. Teachers called her dependable. Jessica called her her shadow. They ran together, studied together. If Jessica wore blue, Ellie wore green. If Jessica spoke, Ellie listened. But on October 12, 1973, the morning Jessica vanished. Ellie was absent from their jog. Sore ankle, she said. A mild sprain, never documented. No doctor visit, no note. When Mara confronted the timeline, it began to fray. Ellie had claimed to be home all morning. Her mother corroborated the story back then, though she'd later develop Alzheimer's, leaving that confirmation frozen in time, unchallengeable. Ellie said she'd slept late, iced her ankle, listened to records. Alone. The high school attendance logs showed her present by fourth period. No limping, no mention of injury. In the attic, Mara found an old track jersey carefully folded. Jessica's name was inked faintly on the inside collar. Below it, barely visible beneath fading marker, another name, E. Vance. Jessica had borrowed it once, but here it was, folded in Ellie's box, tucked beneath a layer of pressed flowers. A collection or a shrine, Mara sifted through Ellie's journals. Most entries were benign shopping lists, song lyrics, TV schedules. But in a notebook labeled 1973 Private, a page was torn. The following entry remained: "She doesn't see me anymore. Not like before. I gave her the pen and she just laughed. Said it was sweet. Sweet. Like I'm a puppy. I made her a tape. She hasn't played it. I know because she would have told me. She tells me everything used to. But now she talks to him, the coach. I saw them. She's lying. The script was sharp, not Ellie's usual neat loops. The edge of obsession." Mara read it again slowly. "I gave her the pen. Not borrowed. Given." And the tape, another reference to a specific item, one that surfaced in Lucas's trailer. Ellie had dismissed the pen when questioned back in '87. Said she didn't recognize it. That Jessica probably carried too many trinkets. But that pen was a gift. A symbol of something Ellie believed sacred and had been ignored. The photos. The monogrammed pen. The missing morning. Mara stared at the entry, her fingers trembling. What if Ellie hadn't stayed home that day? What if she had followed Mara, stepped into the forest before dawn just as Jessica had? The air was slick with mist, the trees skeletal in silhouette. Every branch creaked under the weight of silence. Here, time hadn't moved on it, merely curled inward. Waiting, she followed the path Jessica had once run, her recorder clipped to her collar, breath held between questions. The same trail where the scream had been heard. The same place the gray truck had been seen. Halfway in, she stopped. There, beneath the split trunk of an alder, lay the faded remnants of a wooden trail marker. Its letters long since worn, but one could still make out the name etched faintly in the Grain Witch's hollow. Locals had whispered about this place, kids dared each other to run it at night, but to Jessica and Ellie, it was just a shortcut, one they knew better than anyone. At the fork where the official path veered left, Mara noticed something odd, a faint indentation leading right. Too narrow for a car, but wide enough for a single jogger and a follower. She crouched, brushing away leaves. Underneath the glint of old glass, a broken cassette case. Cracked along the edge, but still legible, JM, Side B. She froze. The same handwriting. Jessica's. How had it ended up here? The broken case hadn't been in the backpack. It had never entered evidence. It had been here at the scene all this time, lost or left behind. Mara sat back on her heels, thoughts racing. If Ellie had followed Jessica that day, if she confronted her here, this is where things could have shifted, where a confrontation became something else, a scream heard distantly, a trap placed with care, a burial not far off. And then the voicemail returned to her mind, Ellie's final words, frail and unfinished. I need to tell you something about Jessica. I can't hold it anymore. Why now? Why, after all these years, Mara hadn't played that message again? Until now. She stood, pressed play, the voice thin and reedy. It was never supposed to happen like that. I only wanted her to understand, but she was scared. And then, it was too late. Click. Dead air. The woods pressed inward tighter than before. Mara's breath caught. She had always thought she was chasing a killer. Now she feared she'd been walking in her footsteps. In the archive room of South Eugene High, Mara ran her fingers along dusty drawers of microfilm and long-forgotten staff. Files. A janitor let her in with little more than a shrug. Nobody looks at this stuff anymore, he said. Ghosts down here. She was looking for the trap. Not the one found at the grave, but one just like it. She found it in a yellowing photo from the 1973 Science Fair bulletin. Jessica and several classmates gathered around a table. On it, a display board titled Predator and Prey, Understanding Mechanisms of Capture. Centered below the title, a sprung animal trap, identical to the one unearthed in the clearing. To the right of the student stood Mr. Edwin Hall, the biology teacher. Gray slacks, clip-on tie, a hand resting protectively on Jessica's shoulder. Hall had passed in 1980. Stroke. He'd taught for over 2 decades, beloved by most, but his curriculum often edged into the macabre, animal dissection, taxidermy displays. Students joked that he preferred teaching things that couldn't speak. Mara found his teaching logs in a water-damaged binder. On October 11, 1973, the day before Jessica vanished, he signed out 3 demonstration traps from the biology storeroom. Only 2 were returned. At the time, no one thought anything of it. She took the photo to the sheriff's department. The current chief, too young to remember the original case, raised an eyebrow. Interesting, he said, but doesn't explain the pen, or the photos, or Ellie. Still, they reopened the inventory file. One item caught Mara's attention, a biology kit signed out by Ellie Vance in September of '73. Project listed species tracking behavior, observational notes. Jessica had been her subject. The pieces turned again. Ellie had access to the school darkroom. Ellie had handled traps under supervision. Ellie had kept a journal that blurred observation with obsession, but she'd also been a victim, ignored, invisible. Her tracking project may have been her way of staying close, of controlling the narrative. Back in Ellie's attic, Mara found a folder labeled Wildlife Reports. Inside were sketches, dozens of them, of a figure running through trees. The face changed, but the hair always the same. Blonde, tied back. Jessica. At the bottom of one sketch, a single sentence underlined twice. She never turned around. The pen had always been there, filed away, catalogued, forgotten. Yet it had been the first object buried with the photographs nestled deep in the backpack like a signature no one knew how to read. Mara now stared at it beneath the glass of the evidence tray. Black lacquer gold trim worn smooth from touch. The initials EV. Faint, but unmistakable. Ellie Vance had claimed not to recognize it, claimed Jessica must have bought it herself, but Jessica hadn't. Mara found the proof in a letter tucked between Ellie's old sketchbooks. A birthday card, hand-drawn, the corners yellowed with age. Happy, sweet 16. Jess, for every thought you won't say aloud. E. Inside, taped carefully, the receipt, Levin Stationery, 1 monogrammed pen, $11.95. Dated 5 days before Jessica vanished. It was a gift. A confession in ink. Mara sat in the attic long after dark, the single bulb overhead casting harsh shadows across the floorboards. The pen's presence at the burial site was no longer an accident. It wasn't something Jessica had taken with her. It had been placed there by the one who had buried her. A deliberate act. A signature of guilt. Mara flipped through Ellie's last journal. The entries had grown erratic in her final year, memory fading. But one passage had been circled as if Ellie feared it would slip away. I watched her run ahead of me. She always did. I called out, but she didn't hear. She had the tape, the gift. She laughed when she saw the trap, thought it was a joke. Then she looked back, and her smile. The sentence ended there, no punctuation, just blank space. Mara returned to the voicemail, played it again, focused not on the words, but the breath between them. There was no shock, no regret, only quiet resolution. She had waited 14 years. Let others take the blame, Creel, Lucas, Emery, Bell. Each a perfect misdirection, each with motive, proximity, strangeness. But none had loved Jessica in the way that poisons the mind. Only Ellie had. The girl who was always there, who followed quietly, who gave a gift and watched it be forgotten. Mara realized then it had never been about violence. It had been about erasure. And the moment Jessica turned her back for the last time, the recorder clicked off. Mara sat across from the empty chair in the sheriff's office where Ellie had once been questioned but never charged. The room smelled of coffee gone stale and old carpet. In front of her, the evidence laid bare: the pen, the negatives, the broken cassette case, and the photos. The story had revealed itself, not with a scream, but with a whisper. Ellie had followed Jessica that morning, not out of hatred, not at first out of intent. She had believed they could still be saved, she and Jessica. That the rift between them, the growing silence, could be stitched shut with gifts and memories. The photos were hers. The tape, the pen. Breadcrumbs of devotion scattered in a forest that did not care. But Jessica hadn't listened. According to the final unmailed letter Mara found among Ellie's things, addressed simply to whom it may matter, Jessica had laughed when she saw Ellie emerge from the fog. Laughed gently, not cruelly, not knowingly. She hadn't understood. And then Ellie had stepped forward. One push, one strike with a rock, one moment. Then silence. She buried the backpack separately, not to hide it, but to preserve it, as if one day someone would find it and understand what Ellie herself could not say. In the attic, Mara found a final cassette blank except for the sound of breathing and footsteps recorded over and over. The breath never quickened. The footsteps never paused. It was the sound of someone walking away. As they walked back to the car, Mara looked at the woods one last time. The real journey was just beginning. In the end, That was the lesson. Evil might hide behind familiar faces, but truth endures even when buried beneath years of silence. As they moved toward her new future, Mara squeezed her husband's hand. "I don't know if I'll ever sleep right again." "You don't have to. You just have to wake up." They stepped toward healing, toward a future they would build one day at a time. Behind them, the wind moved through the pines, a sound like breath, like a whisper, like the voice of a girl who had finally been heard.
Thank you for listening to Brody's Stories. Until we meet again.